Hi, so this is our first entry for Assignment 3 of EDUC3627. This week the topic's on government policies, spending and funding, and we're just going to be discussing some questions around raising teacher status and reducing disparities between schools. So Shika will be running the conversation with the first question.
All right, so we're just going to firstly talk about reflecting on how we were received in our placements and as pre-service teachers by the school, the students, and the community. So, Danny, do you want to go first about how you were received as a pre-service teacher in the school by students or just the community?
Yeah, so I found most of the time I was pretty welcomed by all my teachers, but the amount of support that I got from my mentor teachers varied. Some were really enthusiastic to help me out. Some kind of just gave me the work and watched. Yeah, so that was my experience. It was pretty mixed, but overall positive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Alicia, you want to go next?
Yeah.
So all of my teachers that I had as mentor teachers, they were all quite welcoming to me, luckily, and all were very willing to help me. I think the only issue was that sometimes they were quite busy within like their own role, and that's the only reason why sometimes they were a little more reserved in helping me. But otherwise, I was very welcomed into their schools.
Yep. Miles?
Yeah, I agree with the mentor teachers I've had. It's been quite varied in how much time they've actually had to devote to helping me. Sometimes they were able to really work with me and were very welcoming, and other times I never had any unwelcoming mentor teachers, but just weren't able to provide as much support as others.
And Apatella?
Yeah, so I had only one mentor teacher, it was my first place, and luckily that it was my mentor's. I was the first pre-service teacher of my mentor, so he was very happy about it, and actually he was very supportive, and he had no clue how to do the process, but anyway, he was learning too, and I was learning too, so we worked very well. He was very open to my suggestions, so which I found very good for me because it was my first placement. So in short, really, I had a really good placement. So, yeah.
That's good. I found
Awesome.
I found that too. I found everyone was very welcoming in my recent placement, and the one before that, I found my mentor was really nice as well. But she had a really bad experience with pre-service teachers 10 years prior, so she was very standoffish and was a bit worried about the placement and everything, and that's why I think she had already some preconceived notions towards what I might be like or what I might do. So I feel like she had very, very high expectations in that sense, which was hard for me to always live up to, and I felt at times a bit broken down because I felt like I wasn't achieving as much as I should have. But I think that was just to do with expectations, and they're not standardized, obviously, so it can be varying. But in my recent placement, it was really good. I had 4 mentors, which was a bit difficult, but they all were very supportive and helpful and worked really great together so that I wasn't confused with whatever they were saying, and it was sort of one instruction rather than 4 different instructions. Right, so that's good to hear. So the second question is that how could the teaching profession be better promoted or allow for a better understanding of how hard teachers actually work, and what assumptions are made about teachers, teaching, learning, and are they true? So I'll just leave this one open. You guys can, make whatever input you guys want. I won't go one by one.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone have an idea of how the profession could be better promoted and allow for a better understanding of how hard teachers actually work?
I guess, yeah, it's quite hard to actually put your finger on how it could be better promoted, but I do think that there seems to be like or how hard teachers work does often seem to be undersold a bit, and I think it can be seen a bit as like an easier career or like a second option career maybe, but when you actually like get down to it, it's a lot of work, and like a lot of teachers really put their heart and soul into their work.
Yeah, I think that is one of the assumptions that is made about teaching and teachers, that it can be seen as like a backup plan, and a lot of the times it might not be a first option. But I think with the current times, I think it even shows how important teachers are and how hardworking they are to have to change their teaching style, just everything they know about teaching in the matter of a couple of months, or some teachers had to change it in a couple of weeks, having to go completely online. I think that itself shows like the dedication some teachers put into their work, and
Definitely.
the hard work.
Yeah, I think as well, like often those negative attitudes we're talking about can be like can directly impact a teacher via like parents at the school or children at the school kind of having that opinion. So maybe a way that you could try and combat that at like a school level would be through like really celebrating like achievements of teachers in newsletters and things like that, and really trying to like just show parents and the greater school community like how hard some of these teachers are working.
And it's not just teaching, is it? So because at one instance I remember that one of the parents sent an email saying that her boy had a really bad holiday, because I started my placement just after the school holidays. So she was mentioning that his boy's grandmother was sick, so he was very sad. So the email was to keep an eye on him. So my teacher was mentioning like there are 28 students in class. So especially when you get emails like this, you have to focus on that too, right? So, and I remember one instance, an email saying my teacher has to prepare a report for identifying learning disability of one of the students. So he was preparing a 5-hour report. So while doing all the other things, so luckily I was there to take over the classroom. So things like these other things actually comes in. So it's not just teaching that teachers have to worry about. So much involved in that role, isn't it?
Yeah.
Could I add? I think that's the thing. I think there's two ends to it. Like, I remember when I first started out with teaching, and I told people, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's so good. Like, you get school holidays." Just the idea that teaching will be pretty breezy. But then now, I don't know. As I get older, I think my friends get older as well. They're like, "Oh, I could never do teaching. Like, that's just way too difficult. Like, hanging out with kids all day." So I feel like there's two ends, and so there'd be two different ways to promote the profession, like in terms of maybe people knowing that there's better support for teachers in the school. We're looking at the other end of the spectrum where people are like, it's not for me kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think
that's
also
a good point. Sorry.
I was just going to say, looking at it as like, teaching in the 21st century is like way different to what it used to be. So often like there's people maybe like older generations who look at teachers and maybe think like there's like, those who can't do teachers back then were way different to what we are now. I feel like we do a lot more for our students now than what teachers ever had. More than just, teachers going home again. You're some people with errors, and you've got so many more responsibilities than what people do realise.
Yeah, it seems like there's much more of a focus on supporting students these days than there used to be, rather than just teaching the content.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to move forward to the next question we have, which is about resources. So things like, what kind of resources did your school have? Was it well resourced? Do you have ideas or ways which a school or you yourself could fight for better funding to ensure there's more resources in the future? I know this is something we had a difficulty like discussing last time, so maybe, anything you guys have? I could start with saying that my experience in being at 2 private schools compared to a public school was that in the private schools, all students had laptops and they were always well prepared with the laptops were charged, laptops, were always there, and they had a wide resource of textbooks or anything right at their hand. Whereas with public schools, even though the public school I went to was of really well resourced, all students did bring their own laptops. There were times where students wouldn't have them charged, or some students wouldn't bring them, and there wasn't really much you could do about it. Whereas with private schools, they could have loan laptops that could go out and like they could go borrow, whereas in public, if you don't have one, you don't have one.
Yeah, I definitely saw a big difference between the 2 schools I was at, one being private, one being public as well. And like what you said, Shika, the public school wasn't like poorly funded, but at the private school, there was just like, they were just so much more able to really like push students in their like hobbies and like the things that they really enjoyed. Like they could really give them access to like all the facilities they needed to do those things. Which obviously, it still gives them such a more like inviting and exciting school environment, having access to those things.
So my first placement was at a private school. So as you guys said, there was a big difference. So everyone got laptops, and even the school had resources when you do experiments and stuff. So they have pretty much everything that they wanted. But I was reading one of the articles the other day, and it was telling about these funds. And it says that for most of the public schools, so they pretty much get the full amount that each student approximately spend a year. So, for example, for a primary school student, 10,950 is the average price that they are looking for. And for public schools, definitely the government paid for that money. But for private schools, the government is looking whether the parents can actually afford this. But if the parents can't, they are going to give a partial payment. Oh. So I think maybe, And for secondary students, the average cost they calculate as $13,764.
The next question is that does the concept of lifelong learning play a role in future advocacy of the profession?
I suppose it makes teaching seem a lot more valuable. I think that's one of the assumptions made about teachers and school in general is that we teach them these facts and expect them to remember it, and students are always asking when are we going to use this in real life? But teaching is much more than that. It's about equipping them with the skills that they can use later in life, not just a bunch of facts. And I think promoting that in the profession of teaching is really important to make it more see more positively.
Alright, so lastly we have is that do the broader community and media encourage or discourage males to enter the profession? Will this ever change? So maybe Miles and Apalitha could comment a bit more on this with your personal sort of experiences, and we could talk about what we've seen and how we see it.
Yeah, well, personally, I've had, good reception at schools. Being a male, I haven't felt discouraged, but I definitely think it is traditionally looked at as more of a female role, particularly in primary school and early childhood.
Mm-hmm. So if I could just quickly cut in, Pam will know this, but if anyone ends up putting this kind of video on their portfolio or anything, we're all secondary teachers.
Yeah.
So we don't have that view on that, knowledge about primary and early childhood. But Apatilla, do you have any sort of view on males in the teaching profession and how they're welcomed? or if they're discouraged?
So as you guys said, I'm from Sri Lanka, by the way. So I moved to Australia 10 years ago. So most of the opinions that I grew up was like teaching is for female. But the first job I got after my bachelor's degree was a bit of a teaching role. So that's how I started liking teaching. But anyway, so I enjoy teaching, and most of the times I met male teachers, and so one, maybe I mentioned this last time. So one of the lecturers week before actually mentioned that Australia is trying to promote male teachers to step in because most of the times children actually get to see female role models, but actually the lecturer said that if males jump in, that means it's good for role development of children because they can see other options. So therefore, maybe kind of a good thing that we jumped in to do teaching.
Yeah, definitely. I do think, that's particularly important that students are exposed to both male and female role models in school, because some students might only have like negative associations with like, say, male role models outside of school. So to be able to give them positive role models from both genders is really important.
Yeah, exactly.
From a different perspective, in secondary, I've only ever seen male teachers in the fields of like science and PE, sometimes in like English and HAS, but I think I haven't seen them as much. And I've been seeing increasingly more in art and things like that, but that's basically... I feel like in secondary it's not as discouraged, and people are pretty welcoming of males in teaching profession in secondary. Maybe in early and primary it's a bit of, I don't know, discouraged because of preconceived notion. I'm not too sure about that, but that's basically...
I can add something about that. So I had a friend who was doing early childhood, and he was a guy, and they loved him. Like, they actually really want more males in the profession, because it's really like, I think he only had one or two other guys in his entire cohort, early childhood education. So I know that places are really wanting males. I think maybe what discourages them is working with young kids, and claimed as well, in the past of bad encounters, I guess, with male workers and the kids or something. But I know it's pretty much encouraged early childhood.
Maybe I can add something, Danny, because my daughter is just 2.5 years, and there's one male educator at my daughter's daycare center. So according to my wife, so when that person's there in my daughter's room, she's really happy singing, and because one male for the whole center. So as you're saying, maybe it's a good difference experience for the children as well.
And I think, as what you guys were saying, it's good for kids to just have that difference in, role models. Like, you shouldn't always see one person as a role model, and I think it's very important for students who don't have a positive role model at home who is a male to come to school and then have that person in their life. Anyway, that concludes our questions for this week. Is there anything anyone wants to add or say?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Oh, good. All right.